According to the book of Proverbs, close friends, really close friends, are hard to find. And when you find one, you need to treasure him and let him or her treasure you. What I mean by a close friend is someone who always has your back, someone you can count on in the middle of the night to call, someone to whom you can tell anything, someone whom you can just really be yourself and know that they're still going to be your friend. You have any friends like that? Listen to what Proverbs has to say about friends like that. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. I like this one too from Proverbs 18. A man of many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. You have any close friends like that? Today in episode 3 of David the Boy Who Became King, we're going to meet David's closest and most loyal friend. And his name is Jonathan. And guess who he is? That's right. He's the son of King Saul, the man who so desperately wants David dead. Now, if you've never heard this story, you're going to be fascinated by it. You know, if you struggle to have friends or be a friend, this is going to help you. If you struggle with envy or jealousy, this is going to help you. If you struggle to trust God with your uncertain future, this can help you. And if you'd like to find the truly greatest friend anyone could ever have, who will never, ever let you down or never leave you, this is going to help you do that. Well, let's get started. We want to first look at where we've come from the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we talked about how David the shepherd boy was anointed by Samuel the prophet as the next king of Israel. Now, he was a very young boy at the time. We think maybe early teens or mid-teens at the oldest. So really a shocking thing. And you can imagine what a shock it was to his 7 brothers as they all watched as he was anointed the next king. And then the amazing thing was God just had him go back out and continue taking care of the sheep. There was going to be a period of time. God's timing is perfect. And we have to sometimes wait on him. That's what David had to do. But then opportunity came, and you remember what happened? Warwick did a great job of sharing this last week. We saw David miraculously kills a giant and instantly becomes a celebrity. I mean, I'm sure he was probably on all the talk shows. He had his own tennis shoe line. I mean, he was Mr. Popularity. What a shock that must have been. So what we want to do is to pick it up literally minutes after he's killed Goliath. It's 1 Samuel chapter 18. After David had finished speaking to Saul, the king, who wanted to know who he was, David came out, and guess who was standing there? That's right, Saul's son, Jonathan. Now, he'd been watching the whole thing, and you can imagine how he felt. Jealous? Wow, who's this kid? Where did he come from? Is he going to be a rival to me? Man, he was so brave. He went and killed Goliath. I wish I'd had that kind of faith. No, this is what Jonathan thinks. And the soul of Jonathan was knit to David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his father's house. And Jonathan made a covenant, a pact, an oath, deeper than just friendship. This was a thing where the two of them came together and said, we want to be in covenant with each other. We want to promise some things that we will do to the day we die, and which we will ask God to hold us accountable to. That's what a covenant is. And they made a covenant with each other because he loved him as his own soul. And then Jonathan did something really unusual. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his armor, his sword, his bow, and his belt, which is where you kept all your weapons. Now, what was Jonathan doing? He loved David so much, and he felt so connected with him that he wanted to somehow help David. So what he did was basically gave him everything he needed to be recognized by the people as a part of the royal family. I mean, one of the illustrators have shown that maybe he gave David a purple robe, because purple was the sign of royalty back then. Only royals could wear it. It's hard to get. You had to get it from some marine animals up around Tyre. So, I mean, it was very, very expensive. Maybe he gave him that robe. But I'll tell you one thing we know was valuable was the sword, because we read later that the Philistines were not letting any of the Israelites have the metal that made the good swords. So only Saul and his son Jonathan had the good swords. He gave David this kingly sword. He was essentially acknowledging, this is a unique young man, and I believe he may well be the next king, And if that's God's will, I'm going to be happy with it. One of the things I want you to know, there's two things in particular I want you to get today, and here's one of them. God will send true friends into our lives when we need them, but we must be willing to let them into our lives. One of the things I admire about this story is how both David and Jonathan were both willing to step up and make that covenant. They were both willing to lay aside their own plans, their own thoughts, their own circle of people, and come together and say, wow, here's someone that God has put in my life who's going to contribute in some way to me, and I need to recognize that. And I promise you, God will do the same thing to you as well. I mean, now apparently neither Jonathan nor David was looking for a friend at the time. It was really, God who just divinely brought them together. And I love that word knit that's used there. Do you see that? It's a Hebrew word that basically means to bind or tie together as one. It's used in Proverbs 6 of binding the commandments of your father and mother upon your heart, which is a sacred and a very personal and a very emotional thing to do. And it's also something that God helps just ingrain in you. So this is a God thing. It's a human thing, but it's a God thing too. We especially see it in Hebrews or in Job 38, where we see that God binds the stars in their place. So God is the one who brought their hearts together. Have you ever experienced that before? I mean, in my lifetime, I've had opportunity to have 4 what I would call soul friends. I mean, some people are fortunate if they have 1 or 2. God has been very kind to me to give me 4 over the course of my life in different phases or periods of my life. One of the most dramatic ones was when I went off to seminary. I was a young man in my 20s. I'd finished university and had the opportunity to get into Dallas Theological Seminary, which I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to get in, and I was, and I got the notice that I needed to come, and it all happened very quickly. And I remember the day I left home. I got in my old beater car, packed with everything I had, and I was driving the 4 hours down to where the seminary was. And I remember later my mom and dad talked about it. I had to leave real early in the morning, like 4:30 in the morning, to get down there on time for enrollment. And I remember my parents got up, and my mom fixed a big breakfast, and they walked me out to the car, and we prayed and embraced, and I remember looking in the rearview mirror at them waving until I was out of sight of them. And we talked later about the fact that we realized that I would probably never again live at home. And sure enough, I never did. And so when I got into Dallas, it was a huge city. I hadn't driven in big cities much before, and that was before GPS, my friend. So I had a map I was trying to follow and read street signs. I remember stopping at a traffic light. Some guy behind me, when the light changed, man, he let me have beep that horn. Scared me kind of a couple of years of my life. Anyway, I struggled to find. I finally found where I needed to go, found the seminary near downtown, parked, went, and there was all these big buildings, and I asked the guy where I needed to go to start or enroll, and he pointed over there. And sure enough, here was a long line of guys, and they were all wearing the little suits and coats, because back then it was only guys, and you had to dress up to go to class. And so I got in line, and I was standing there for what seemed like a really long time out in that Texas heat. And suddenly, I was just so nervous and really scared, I have to be honest with you. I just didn't know what was going to happen in the future. And I turned around, and who was there but this big, tall, kind of goofy-looking guy who looked like this. This is him. This is Dan Butler. He's now married to this lovely lady, Charlene. And, of course, this was 45 years ago. But Dan still looks he looked a lot like that 45 years ago. And the odd thing was that he was so different than me. First of all, he came from the worst possible place, Nebraska. I was from Oklahoma, college football, we didn't get along. He was like from a small town. I was from a big city. He was kind of slow and thoughtful and quiet. I was, pretty much like I am now. Anyway, we were the complete opposites. But as we began to talk and as we began to realize that both of us were kind of going through the same emotions, there was something that just drew us together. So we actually went through the whole day enrolling. It was before computers, so it took a long time. And I remember that when we got to the enrollment line, we found out that he was B.U.T. Butler and I was B.U.R. Burgess. Come to find out, for the next 4 years, we would have every single class together. And we found out later that we were going to be living in the same student housing right next to each other. And so over a period of just 24 hours, maybe 48 the most, Dan Butler became a soul friend. And he's been a friend like that ever since. I don't think I'd have made it through seminary without Dan. I don't think he says the same thing about me. But we did help each other. Where I was strong, he was weak, and there weren't many places. And in the many places he was strong and I was weak, he was a real help. Have you ever experienced anything like that? I hope so. yet still God brought these two very different people together. You know why? Because they shared something. What was it? They shared the one thing that made all the difference. They shared the fact that they had a complete faith in God and His plan for their lives. And their greatest desire was to do God's will. Can I give you a bit of advice as I'm here at the latter season of my life? Something I've learned through the years. If you're going to find a close friend, if you're going to find any friend, but particularly if you're going to latch on to one of those soul friends, and that's going to be someone that you're going to really, really spend time with and really share your heart with and really listen to, you know what you need to do? You need to make sure there's someone who loves God with all their heart. If not, you're going to be in real danger. Again, look what Proverbs says. Proverbs 13, whoever walks with the wise will become wise. But the companion of fools, fool says in his heart there is no God, he's going to suffer harm. How about this one? In the same way that iron sharpens iron, a person affects the character of his friend. I want you to see that Jonathan was like this before he even met David. This is an interesting thing. It was to me anyway. Let's back up just a minute, a little flashback. Here we are in 1 Samuel 14. There's a war going on, the Philistines. They brought out a huge army, 3,000 chariots. Army too many to count. And it looks like the Israelites are going to be overrun. And what happens? Jonathan and his armor bearer save the day. There's a particular place where there's a Philistine garrison. It's in a hard place to reach, but he's determined that if he can get up there and attack that garrison, it will so shock the Philistines that perhaps it will help the small Israelite army overcome. And this is what happens. So Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of the uncircumcised. We will see if the Lord will act on our behalf. For listen to what Jonathan says, nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." Wow! Now there's some faith right there, huh? That's incredible. And I love how his armor bearer responds. "Do all that you have in heart," his armor bearer said. "Do as you wish, for I am with you, heart and soul." I find it interesting, too, that people who really love God and who are soul friends have a tendency to attract other people who are like that. It's like there's this hidden supernatural radar going on, and you can kind of feel or pick up on the fact that this is a person that you can trust, that this is a person who's a good person who's trying to walk with God as well. And as a result, we can team up. And it may be for a season or it may be for a lifetime. But either way, that's who you need to be looking for. Well, over the next few chapters, obviously King Saul is going to become obsessed with killing David. He's going to do everything he can to try and kill this young man, which is incredible. So here's Jonathan, his son, who loves David. Here's Saul, the father, who hates David. And he tries all kinds of ways. He sends David off to fight the Philistines, and it says in 1 Samuel that he's hoping the Philistines will do the job for him and kill David. Isn't that interesting? By the way, if you know David's story, much later on, thing with Bathsheba and Uriah, what did David do? Sent Uriah into the battle in order that, fascinating. Saul tried to do it to David. David tragically winds up doing it to one of his best friends later. He marries one of the daughters. Saul thinks he's going to get him that way. He tries twice to kill David himself. He eventually declares, let's kill David. We need to get on with it. He even sends 3,000 men in the army after him. I mean, it's incredible. The important thing is what? Is that God has already prepared the defense that David needs against Saul. And what is it? It's Jonathan. Jonathan. The soul friend is put there by God because he's going to be able to help David in ways that David would not have been helped. Without Jonathan as a friend, as a soul friend, I'm not sure David, humanly speaking, would have survived to be king. And again, like I told you, I've had 4 soul friends, and I don't know where I'd be today. I would not be a pastor. I'm not sure I'd still be married to Yolanda. I'm not sure that I would certainly care about the things that I care about. That's how much these dear brothers helped me, and I hope I, in some way, contributed to them. So here's the second thing I want you to know. First thing is God will send you those soul friends if you'll be open to them. Second thing is true friendships have at least 4 essential things we see in this passage, in these chapters. And I want to share what they are. There's 4 of them. Loyalty, trust, sacrifice, and lasting. Let's look at the first one, loyalty. Loyalty. A friend defends you when others attack you or speak badly of you. And we see this immediately with Jonathan. Look what happens in chapter 19. So Saul said to his son Jonathan and all the servants, kill David. I mean, that's it. He's been kind of hiding it, and he's been kind of doing it, secretly. He just comes right out and says, I want David dead. But Jonathan, who delighted in David, what did he do? He told David, my father, Saul, is looking for a chance to kill you. You need to be on guard, especially tomorrow morning. He's going to send some people over to your house. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field later, and I know where you are, and then I'll speak to him loudly about you, and I will tell you what I find out. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul. Imagine the courage it took to do that. And he said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you. And because his deeds have brought good to you. He took his life in his own hands when he killed the Philistine, Goliath, he's talking about. And also, I love what Jonathan says there, the Lord won a great victory. He didn't say, hey, David won a great victory. He said it was the Lord through David who won the great victory. This Jonathan's still looking beyond David to see God. And for all Israel, you saw it and you rejoiced. Why then would you sin against an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? And Saul listened and swore, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. So Jonathan called David and told him the whole conversation. And he brought him to Saul. He said, it's okay now, come on. And David was with Saul as before. Isn't that wonderful? Only problem was Saul was a very duplicitous man and gradually being more and more consumed by the evil spirit that had been sent to fill the emptiness in his life because he wouldn't let God fill it. And as a result, guess how long this lasted, this great promise? About 2 verses. Look what we read here. But an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand. Always makes you nervous. And David was playing the lyre, which is what he did. By the way, I love this particular picture here. I think it's the best depiction of King Saul I've ever seen in all the paintings I've seen. I love that by a painter named Josephson. Anyway, David was playing the lyre. So Saul tried to pin him to the wall with a spear. David was playing the lyre, which calms Saul. Well, it didn't calm Saul that day. And he throws the spear at David, trying to kill him. And fortunately, apparently, either David was watching or he didn't have as good an aim, and David, he missed. And it hit in the wall and stuck right in the wall. And David was able to escape. Now, let me tell you something about loyalty. Loyalty is not just something that soul friends need to have towards us. Loyalty is something that we need to have towards a soul friend. This goes without saying, but to have a soul friend, you have to be a soul friend. One of the things I love about David here is the fact that he did not doubt Jonathan. Jonathan had come and said, hey, Saul's okay, my dad's okay. He's calmed down, he's not going to kill you. And what happens? David nearly gets killed. So what's David going to think? Oh, Jonathan's a liar. Jonathan's in on it. Oh, I don't want anything to do with Jonathan anymore. No, David didn't think that. David said, I need to go let Jonathan know that his father is much more evil and much more mad than he realizes. And so he trusted Jonathan. And he was loyal to him even after this frightful incident. A friend is someone you can count on to tell you the truth when you most need it. So David goes to speak to Jonathan. This is 1 Samuel 20. And David went to Jonathan and asked, what have I done? What is my guilt? How have I sinned against your father that he's trying to kill me? Another thing I love about David is he's not blaming Jonathan. Hey, your father's crazy. Do you know that? You might be crazy too. I don't know. You told me it was okay. He didn't try to talk about how bad Saul was. He went and immediately tried to analyze his own life. That's the humility that we see in David at this point. Fortunately, he struggles with that through his lifetime, but we're going to see more of that later. How have I sinned against your father that he's trying to kill me? Never, Jonathan said. You're not going to die. What are you talking about? My father promised me that would not happen. He told everybody. Behold, my father does nothing great or small without letting me know. Why would he hide this from me? It isn't so. But David said back to Jonathan, Jonathan, listen, you need to hear the truth. This is what loyal friends do to each other. Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he said to himself, Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as the Lord lives and you live, there is but a step between me and death. Wow, that is a significant statement. Now, how did Jonathan respond? Did he defend his father? Did he say, David, I think maybe you're bringing this on yourself? David, I don't know that we should be hanging around each other anymore. what did Jonathan, the true friend, say? Jonathan said to David, whatever you say, I will do for you. Wow, that just reverberates in my soul. That's incredible. That is what a true friend does. They accept you, they listen to you, they believe you, and then they try and do everything they can to help you. Well, what David comes up with is essentially a plan. He says, what we're going to do is, I need you to go back to your father. There's a new moon festival coming up, which was something they did obviously once a month. And there's going to be a big meal, a big celebration. And he'll be looking for me. And you tell him that I couldn't come because I had to go back home to Bethlehem for something down there for a sacrifice, and see how he responds. And if he gets angry, and if he gets upset, then we'll know that there's going to be a problem. Now, wait just a minute. Saul is gradually, his sanity is eroding. The evil spirit's taking control. He's getting more and more murderous. And he's asking his son to go back in and confront him about David. That's a dangerous thing to do. And that brings up a third thing. Not only do we have loyalty and trust, but we also have sacrifice. A friend, a true friend, puts your good ahead of his own, even if it means risking his own life. So Jonathan does exactly what David asked him to do. And the first day, it's not too bad. Saul says, well, I see David's missing. He must be taking care of some sacrificial cleansing or something. But the second day, Saul figures out what's going on, and he is angry. He is very, very angry. And so he begins to ask Jonathan what's going on. Well, Jonathan tries to give the cover story, and again, Saul just sees right through it. Now, maybe he'd sent someone to Bethlehem to find out what was going on down there, and he knew that wasn't happening. We don't know. But immediately, Saul flies into a rage. I mean, a real rage. Look what he says. Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, "Your son, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman." It's interesting that swear words haven't changed a lot. We have a modern equivalent of that, don't we? Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? Why does he need to bring in John's mother? I don't understand that. As long as the son of, he can't even say David's name. That's how much he hates him. As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. We're going to kill David. It's the only way you're going to keep ruling. You don't want to lose the throne. It's in our family. Come on, wake up, Jonathan. What are you doing? And Jonathan answered and said to Saul, now here he is speaking back to this man who's ranting and raving in front of him. Why should he put to death? What has he done? And here's an amazing thing. This shows you how bad envy and jealousy and bitterness and hatred will eventually consume you. He tries to kill his own son. He takes the spear, the one he threw at David, he throws it at Jonathan. It was then that Jonathan knew that his father was determined to kill David. Hello, I guess so. And Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. And on that second day of the feast, he refused to eat because he was grieved for David, because his father had disgraced him. Wow, he's brokenhearted. So Jonathan goes, he spends the night, and the next day, the third day, is when he was supposed to let, Jonathan goes to spend the night. The next day was when he was supposed to let David know what the answer was about his father. And they'd made a plan. And the plan was, he said, I'm going to come out into the field with my bow and arrow. And he said, I will shoot some arrows. And I'll shoot these arrows, and if they go short, then that means that it's safe. You can come. But if they go long, if they go far, then you need to go far. You need to go and keep on going, because my father really does want to kill you. And so that's exactly what he did. He came out, he shot the arrows, and just like he had showed David he was going to do. And then he told the boy who was the one who was to retrieve the arrows, he goes to get them, and he tells him, the arrows have gone far. You know, they've gone far, not short. And instantly David would have known what was happening. And I can only imagine that at that moment, both David and Jonathan's hearts sank. And they realized that their friendship was in the midst of a tsunami of evil and guilt and incrimination and murder that Saul was after doing. And so what happened then? Probably one of the most poignant scenes in the whole Bible. I mean, this is full of emotion. And after the boy had gotten the arrows and gone in, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times, showing him enormous honor and deep love and appreciation. He had his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other, as is the custom in that culture. And not only that, but I remember of the 4 mentors I've had, 2 are in heaven. And here just a few years ago, one of those mentors, I have spent the last day that I thought I would see him on earth, and it turned out to be true. And I remember before I left, I was sitting out on the patio reading scripture to him, and I had to go back and get in the car and go back to the airport to fly back here. And I remember kissing my friend on the cheek. Yeah, man to man, because I loved him so much. And so that's what David and Jonathan did. They kissed and they wept together. But David wept the most. Why do you think that happened? Why did David weep more? I think it's because both of them knew that this situation with Saul and their friendship, which they weren't going to abandon, would probably result in Jonathan's death. What it did, it was not long, he would die beside his father in battle. And Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is witness between you and me, and between the descendants, your descendants and my descendants forever." Soul relationships sometimes can go from generation to generation. Then David left and Jonathan went back to the town. So, loyalty, trust, sacrifice, one last really important thing. True soul friendships, they last. They really do, through everything. Not only that, but they can last in the sense that if you don't see a soul friend for a long time, you can pick right back up where you started. My friend Dan, I don't get to see him very often. He's went into the Air Force where I went into pastoring, and he became a colonel chaplain, very unusual for a chaplain to reach that rank. And he's traveled all over the world, counseling and teaching and doing the chapels, obviously, and has had such an amazing ministry. But we haven't been able to stay in very good touch. But I called him. It had been several years since we've been in touch. And I called him and told him, "Hey, we're coming through Phoenix. That's where he lives. Could you come to the airport and meet?" And I was a little unsure. I hadn't seen him in maybe I don't know, I'd say 7 or 8 years. And I remember we came out of the airport there, out of the gate, where you meet people. And there was Dan and Charlene standing. And I walked up and we gave each other the biggest hug and we started talking, and it was like we had just been together the day before. That's what true friendship is like. It lasts. It endures no matter what. Look what happened. What happened was David is sometime later, we don't know how long, but probably a good period. Could have been a couple of years, as long as that. And David's been on the run. I mean, he's been a fugitive. And Saul's been after him with the army. I mean, he's been hunting him. And David has escaped by God's grace again and again and again and again. And finally, he's in a place called Horish, which means forest. And he's in the wilderness of Ziph. So he's down south. He's surrounded. And it looks like that this time Saul's going to have him. And what happens? Jonathan, out of nowhere, shows up. And while David was at Horish in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horish, and what did he do? He helped David find strength in God. Wow, that is so powerful. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second, standing next to you. Isn't that amazing? I mean, he could have been the king. It was his, he would have been the one. But he loved David so much, and he realized David was God's anointed, and that was more important to him than himself being king. I heard one time that the great conductor Leonard Bernstein was interviewed, and he was asked by this guy, "What's the most difficult instrument to play in the orchestra?" And without even thinking, Bernstein replied, "Second fiddle." He said, "I can always get good first violinist, but to find somebody who'll be the second violinist and give it the same attention and care and passion," he said, "that's a very rare person." Jonathan was a very rare person. He said, "I will be second," and even my father knows, Saul knows that this is going to come to pass. Why he continues to fight against God, I do not know. I think that's what he was saying. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord, a covenant about that they would take care of each other's family, even if the other one died. And then Jonathan went home, back to Gibeah, and David, he remained at Horish. Now, he was able to escape by God's grace again, even out of this. So let me ask you this question as we close. Where can you find a true friend who will never leave you or let you down? Where can you find a true friend who will be with you every day for the rest of your life? I tell you who that is, you know? I hope you know. That's right, it's Jesus. Jesus is the true friend. He's the one who fulfills all the friendship traits and so much more. And today, if you will become his follower, he will become your soul friend. Look what Jesus said when he was in the upper room the night before his crucifixion. I find this amazing. He says, "No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. Because all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." And then in another place he says, "Greater love has no man than this, than a person lay down his life for his friends." That's why Jesus went to the cross. He was dying so that people could be his friend. He wants you to be his friend. I love James 2. It says in the scriptures, say Abraham in the Old Testament believed God, and God counted him as righteous because of his faith, and he was called the friend of God. Now, one of the things I want you to see, and we're going to have to conclude here, I've taken a long time. As you can see, I love these passages. They're so important. Jesus has the loyalty of a true friend. We see in Hebrews 7, because he is literally making intercession for us at the right hand of God forever. He's speaking on our behalf. Yeah, just like Jonathan spoke to Saul. God's up in heaven saying, listen, this one belongs to me. This one, she has faith in me. That family, they're a Christian family. Lord, watch over them, take care of them. That's amazing. He's going to do it forever. How about trust? I will never leave you as orphans. Because I live, you will live also. How about sacrifice? You want to know what real love is? Real love is this, not that we loved God, but that he loved us. And he sent Jesus as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. How about this? How about the lasting nature of it? Behold, Jesus said, I'm always with you, regardless of circumstances and every occasion, the Amplified adds, even to the end of the age. And I especially love the way Moses put it. This is fantastic. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or tremble, for the Lord your God is the one who goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. You want to find a friend like that? Then today, find Jesus. He is the true friend. Let me encourage you to do something. If you need a friend today, especially if you need a friend like Jesus, let me encourage you to pray a prayer that I'm going to put on the screen. I'm going to pray right now. I want you to bow your heads with me, close your eyes, whoever's there in the room with you. If you have something else going on, turn it off, or if you're eating, put your utensils down, stop. And let me pray this for you. Let's pray together, shall we? Dear God, I need a true friend. I want to be a true friend. To be honest, I never thought you could be a friend of God, or that Jesus could treat me like that. So today, I ask you to forgive me of my sins because of what Jesus did when he died on the cross for me. Because he lives, I can live also. Live now and live forever. Help me to be a different kind of a friend, a true friend to people. Lord, help me to see Jesus as my friend. Sometimes I feel so lonely and abandoned, so discouraged and hopeless. Lord, help me to look to Jesus as the one who strengthens me and encourages me, who never leaves me and will always love me. And Father, help me to be a true friend to Jesus. In his name I pray. Amen. God bless you, friend.